Hey everyone, we're back again. Beautiful Ashes podcast. We are on chapter 4, community chapter. And once again, I am here with Victor Fadul and Brian Hackney.
Hey, hey.
Thank you guys again. So let's dive into community.
So chapter 4, we wrote this chapter because we wanted to show how integral the community was in facilitating your healing process.
Mm-hmm.
It's not everything, but it is a very vital component. I say that because we don't always want to outsource help when we have the source that we can go to. But God definitely used people in your life very early on.
Yeah.
It just started one by one, pouring in, and then turned into this beautiful garden of people that were able to continue to point you back to God until you became an effective conduit for God to work in and through to help them as well.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that's beautifully said, Vic. In that time in my life, I needed people to pour into me. I needed to be reminded of who I was in Christ. And, we like to look at it hindsight. Wow, God was so methodical. All these people came ushering in. And I think he does that. It's about the openness, the softening of our heart. Are we open to receive that? So it was important for me. That's why the foundation is important. That I had to rebuild. And that's why creating my secret place is important. That is what softened my heart to receive the community that God was going to usher in for me. Because you can miss what God has for you at times. And so I do believe God uses community, because I don't believe we're meant to do this alone. I mean, we have a great relationship with him, and then we have this supplement of people that constantly, like Vic said, point you back to him.
Yeah.
And so it was literally from the minute of my world crashing down, from my great friends I talked about physically driving me, to the counselor who poured into me, to my friend in the neighborhood taking me to my very first Bible study. I always, we talk about this in the intro of the book in case you didn't read it, but there are 3 Jamies in my life. Mm-hmm. And again, I think it's just kind of cool to point out because God was kind of funny in that. And every time I met a Jamie, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I need to pay attention to that person. But the first Jamie that I met was an amazing Bible teacher. She actually still is. She was through Gateway Church. And I always describe it like it was the first time that I felt God speaking to me directly through someone.
Yeah.
Like I just, for the first time, like the words she was speaking were for me. And that was in hearing his word. And remember, this is someone, we're doing Daniel, which is not even a real easy study to hop into, Old Testament. But I so related to Daniel and just staying strong in his faith and not wavering in his faith. And, amongst all of the enemy coming at him. And then, of course, being in the fire, I related to that. Mm-hmm. So just I look back on that and just those little pieces. And I always describe that time, and I actually stayed and studied with Jamie the entire time that I lived here because she just was brilliant and just a great conduit. She would hate me that I said she was brilliant because she just was so humble in what she did. But I always describe it as it was like going to law school. The way she taught it and the way that I was hungry for it. Mm-hmm. And so it was just the perfect, God just knew who to do that. So that was probably one of the biggest changes, was the first part of community. And the women, I remember going there worried about what they all were thinking, what of all my past and
what have they heard?
Yeah.
How are they judging you?
Yeah. How are they judging me? And, because I was so used to, having, my hardest parts out there for the world to see. And so I did hide out in the very beginning in the community. It was hard
because you were in the limelight.
Yeah.
And what was that like? Like, why did it affect you so much?
I feel like, my roots are, it's funny because people that don't take the time to get to know me, they think they have an impression of who they think I am. But I really am still this small town girl.
Indiana
girl. In the middle of the bean fields and cornfields and the simple life and riding bikes at night and playing kick the can and just the easy, simple life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like there wasn't joy in some of the things that came with the Lime life. I'm not going to ever act like some of those things aren't enjoyable, but I always still knew that the family and the roots were what was really important. Those things are nice, but it wasn't my heart. And so when the Lime life or that part started to pull at the foundation of my family.
Changed.
Yes.
Things changed.
They did change.
You changed, your family changed, life changed.
Life changed. Oh. And remember, control freak, I confess, and I was not in the relationship that I have now with Jesus.
Right.
I didn't. So what did I try to do? Control. I'm going to try to control everything I can to stop this from spinning and feeling like everything that's going to destroy my family. And so I just wanted to hunker down. My community didn't exist because I'm inside with my family and my children and trying to protect the thing I love the most. When in hindsight,
Your little foxhole, your bunker. Yeah, it was all protected.
Because we all know there's a lot of snares out there in that world. And so I just did not want my family to be prey to that. I've seen it. I saw it. And so, but not
unbeknownst too. It's not like you were thinking back then, I don't want my family to get sucked into snares of the world,
exactly.
right? From this like Christian worldview.
No, I didn't.
It was, you had just seen a lot of the pitfalls that other people in that world that you knew had fallen into, and you didn't want the same thing, or maybe thought it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
To you.
I actually never thought it would happen, to be honest with you. And I think that's part of the shock of it all. And I thought that, that we had it all.
It wasn't
together.
a fear. It wasn't on your radar.
It really wasn't. I mean, I just thought we were in our little protective cocoon, to be honest with you. And I look back on that and not having that type of relationship that I have now with Jesus, let alone my community that could have really served me in that time. I know they were there. I actually know my kids went to an amazing school at that time with some loving teachers, and I just know their hearts now. I just know that they were there. I just was too shut off to allow them in. And so coming out from under that and having to walk my most painful moment out in the public eye was terrifying to come into community. So going to that very first Bible study in the neighborhood that I had been living in, that I thought we were protected behind the walls, was where it all happened. And where it all fell apart. Yeah, behind the walls. And so to go into one of their homes to do this study was terrifying. And it was the most freeing experience because these women in there, they didn't care about any of that. They cared about my heart and my soul. And it was such a beautiful experience for me to be able to say, God has my community if I will just be willing to step out into it. It's there.
Vulnerability, accountability, breed what? Intimacy.
Absolutely.
Right.
It is so interesting how your perception of what was going to happen, this is what we all think. I don't care what has happened in your life. You think, they don't know me. What are they going to think? They're going to judge me. And it's funny because of all the vulnerability I see in my wife's 20-something group. And one of the girls made a comment one time, I'll never forget. She said, it just takes 10 seconds of courage. But like getting out of the car and walking in, social anxiety now and just the anxiety. She said, just 10 seconds of courage. Because once you get in there, you go, oh my gosh, they loved and accepted the warmth. And it was just, so if you're listening and you've been avoiding that community, just start with 10 seconds of courage.
Absolutely. And we all have had
mustard seed of faith.
Yeah, there you go.
And we have, and a lot of us obviously have things in our past that we have maybe have gone in and out to a different type of community and been hurt. And so it can be, and that's what happened to me. I had a community,
got burned.
A lot of people, during that time period in my life were no longer in my life. So what I thought I had as a community was not a safe community. So to allow myself to get into a different type of community and be open to that was life-changing for me.
Well, and God was so gentle with you.
Yes.
I had kind of a front row seat, during that time. And that was one of the funny bonds. It's like I literally had no clue, zero clue about what was going on. What I did know is that you were hurting. And I did know that trying to come out on the other side of that had to be very isolating because you were already set inside of a community that was isolated. Right. It's the very nature of it. Right. And I remember even at church, you were a little bit isolated. Yeah. Up in the rafters.
Up in my rafters at Gateway, and
safe in the rafters.
Safe in the rafters. And it was actually exactly where I was supposed to be at that time. For me, again, that was...
You were there.
Yeah, I was there. And the word getting poured into me there and the worship music. And I can remember being there with my kids just up in there hiding out, tears running down. But it was still the comfort. And so in that period, I think God had me up in those rafters so he could reach my heart. And he really reached me. And that's when I learned to love worship music, where I could understand how that would just move my soul. That was another one of the comforts. So, that going there was one of the other big critical steps that I took into community. And even further there, they have some amazing classes I took, freedom training and some things just to get through, some of my brokennesses all the way from childhood through my marriage, just to help set me free. I didn't realize that what that was setting me up for, what I ended up, using that for. But, we talk about free people. So for you to be able to eventually get to the place where I could use this pain for purpose, I myself needed to get that healing. And so it was in community and stepping out into that where that actually started, the healing started to happen inside that community. So that was such a great church. And then, go ahead.
Well, so you talk about isolation. We're more isolated now as a culture than we've ever been.
Yes.
Right. And that whole failure to thrive thing that happens in an infant, if they don't get all the touches they need, they failure to thrive, they can literally die. And I don't think that ever goes away. That literally, if they don't give enough touches, not just like milk and food,
love
like
from a
human
parent.
touch.
Yes, human
This
touch.
it's insane, but we still need that. Well, but so what happens when we isolate? And of course, all the likes on social media, not real likes. All the follows, not real follows. All the friends, not friends.
Right.
So we're so isolated. We got this sense of connection, and we're not connected. And but one of the things isolation does, so the enemy can lie to you and say you're the only one. It's not only you're just in this pain and going through it alone, but you think, I'm the only one. Yeah. And so all of a sudden you get in the community, you realize, oh, wow, you too?
Yes.
I'm not the only one. I'm not crazy.
Yes.
I'm not alone.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so good.
And people do want to just love on you and be, and like you talk about that, there is something about sitting next to somebody and they might just put their hand on you because they know you're having a hard time. And it is just little gestures like that, but you have to have the courage or the 10 seconds to get into community and trust that. And God just kept leading me down that path of community.
And inside those spaces, I don't know about you, but I know that when I branched out and started going to, like AA groups or whatever, when I started to have real intimacy occurring inside of a relationship, and I'm not talking physical, I'm talking like just intimacy inside of a relationship, that occurred out of vulnerability, a space where I felt known.
Yes.
In the book, right, it said in my head, I think, sure, I'm just missing the one thing I valued most, intimacy inside of my marriage.
Yeah.
To have intimacy inside of a relationship and to feel completely known is it.
It's
like
it.
You have that.
Yep.
Once you have that in relationship with God, right, in the secret place, when that gets developed, it's like free people, then that opens you up to be able to have that same relationship, not the same, but to have intimacy inside of relationships with people again, where you start to feel safe and grow. And
we've said it so often around here, it kind of can roll off your tongue, to be fully known and fully loved. Like that's what we want. It's so if you break that down, to be fully, loved but not fully known, you feel like a fraud. Like if they really knew, and that's the way a lot of people feel. And then of course to be not fully loved, but you're fully known and not loved. That's rejection, right?
Yep.
But to be fully known. My wife Jamie says intimacy. Yeah, another Jamie. Yeah, intimacy.
Yeah.
We want to be seen, and we want to know that when you see me, you don't run. Yeah.
Well, and I would say that right there, and you mentioned that a bit, the not having what true intimacy means, and it's not the physical aspect. It is that vulnerability. That's that where you feel like that person fully knows your heart and they love you anyway.
Yes.
And they're not going anywhere. And so. Not having that in my marriage and not knowing it. Like it's just interesting. Like I look at it now, hindsight, and I was craving that. I was craving to be known, to be heard, to be seen, which is part of that control. Like if you can just control all that, then you'll get that feeling and not understanding that was a vacancy that was causing a lot of the demise and was also causing some really unhealthy coping mechanisms that I was trying to use to hold on to what was lacking inside of that. And so that was what was really great when God brought me out into community and showed me what that really looks like, to be in vulnerable relationships with people that do fully know you and they fully love you.
Yeah.
And like you said, that's a really great way to think about that and what it looks like when you only have one.
Yeah. In a lot of the marriage work I do, I hear spouses that have gotten resentful towards their partner, and obviously some of them work it out, some of them don't. But I hear this, I've just figured out I don't need my partner. Jesus is my lover. Jesus is all I need. And it sounds great, right?
It's great in theory.
You have to have your identity in Christ, right?
Sure.
And we could talk about that for a whole podcast.
Right.
But I always go back to, wait, Adam had God.
Yep.
And God said it's not good for man to be alone.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And it's so, we have to, Jesus, again, this is theology, right? This is New Testament theology. We so overlook it, because I'm all about, we talked about, I think in a former podcast, God out there, but we're the manifest presence of God.
Right.
Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. But he didn't stop there. Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ that was in Jesus was going away, and they were freaking out. Like, don't freak out. I'm coming back. And where am I going to live? In you. I'm going to reside in you. And so when we say the hearts of hands of Jesus, you literally, I love the Pauline metaphor, the body of Christ. Your community is the body of Christ.
Yes.
That's not some light little point
No.
there. That's everything. When Jesus said, he didn't say, don't hate your brother and love God. He said, it's not possible. You can't say you love God and hate your brother, because they're one and the same. Why? Because the divine lives in your brother. So that community is so, so important. Yep.
How did you know that you were safe in community? Did that take time? Because I've had people ask, if they're going to a meeting, it's like, how do you know who to talk with, who to get in these deep conversations with? Like,
And I do think there needs to be discernment around that. Not everybody has earned the right to know your story.
That's good. That is
is.
good
Well,
right there.
it's maybe because I can be an overtalker and oversharer, so that might come from some personal experience. But I do think you do need discernment in relationships, and it takes time. You don't just, allow anyone in there. Again, I think that also starts back to our secret place, when you know who you are in Christ, and God will give you that discernment in relationships. And coming from someone that, think about that. Complete and utter just shock and awe and rejection inside my marriage. So to be able to trust even another human, let alone another man again one day, took time. And so I would just say a lot of it was, I spent a lot of time just listening to them, just getting to know somebody, hear their heart. And now with that discernment, I actually know when I can see them functioning through the lens of Jesus. You can you learn to discern people by the way they view the world. What worldview do they have? And so when I would see that they had definitely, their lens was through the lens of Jesus and how they were pouring into me, then that's where that safety came. But it does bring you back to, as I shared with them all the ugly, the whatever, and they still loved me. And in fact, not only did they still love me, they wanted to love me even more. And just building those type of relationships is what I do now. And you don't need a lot of those. We get this, like you talked about all the likes and everything. One or two, we talked
Jesus
about
had
level
12
10
disciples.
friends. Well, yeah.
And one of them sent him off to die.
Yeah.
And he had 3 in his inner circle.
Right.
Absolutely.
And they still fell asleep.
So, but exactly. So that's what I mean by that. Is just
had one job.
yeah,
You had one job.
trust that community that he will bring you in, but also use discernment, because there is, and you can get hurt, and if you get hurt, then that does happen. I'm not going to act like that has never happened to me since this, but you learn to put healthy boundaries around that. That's also part of your growth and knowing who you are, and again, but you do need to take those first steps just to get out in community, and that for me, that was how I knew that by the lens I could tell that they viewed the world.
And you know what's cool? I just thought of this because she attributed something to you. I think maybe it was in the foundation part, but anyway, it was your community wasn't surrounding yourself with yes men.
Yeah.
The accountability part,
Right.
you surrounded part of your community with people who could say, okay, Beth, it's time to move on. maybe we're stuck a little bit,
exactly.
right?
No, and that is that. And they do it in a way of with
They've earned the right
yes,
because they're in a relationship.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. You don't, because you got it. That's where that safe place has to be, because not everybody is going to do that with the right intentions.
Right.
And or with truth and love, or with grace. All the things that Jesus calls us to do when we are in that position with somebody. But
you can tell the ones who want to scoop.
Absolutely.
They just want to scoop.
And remember, that's going to be a fear of mine, right? Of somebody just wanting to get at me for something.
That's the way of the world.
Yeah, it is the way of the world.
How can you benefit me?
Yep. What can I gain from you? So I won't act like that happened. It did. God ushered people in, and it took time for me to build trust, to really, really get out into that community and function. Which, if we want to transition to this now, but one just made me think about trusting my second Jamie Mullins, which was here at
Love Jamie.
I know Cross Timbers. So at this point, God had really surrounded me with a lot of community through Gateway Church, and also a lot of the teachers and parents from Liberty Christian, where my kids went to school. I just was really surrounded almost daily by people that were just like-minded and pouring into me. And I still had a lot of hurt and pains, but I was growing, and I was in therapy, and I was, just in a space where I was healing and figuring out who Beth really is, who God says she is. Community. And Jamie Mullins came up to me one day, her kids were at Liberty as well. And at the time the kids and I were moving this way closer, and I was looking for a new home church, and she just randomly, I like to say, but there are no accidents. I ran into her, and she's like, hey, at the time she was doing the women's ministry here, leading women's ministry. And she said, I think you have a story to tell. Would you consider being a small group leader? Stop me in my tracks. I'm like, so the thing I have the most shame about, you want me to be this poster child and call myself, I'm the group of divorced women.
Right.
And for me, the answer was yes. And at the time I was doing some other work as far as with CASA, which is the court-appointed specialists that work with kids in the foster care system.
Yeah.
I loved every minute of that. Yeah. And I still knew that when she asked me, because that's great. I was working with kids, and that's all good. It is a really, really amazing organization. And I did feel God calling me to work in the area where I had been in my pain. And I was scared. And I can remember at that point.
And also didn't want to.
Yeah. But I remember going home. I do remember going home that night, and all of a sudden crying. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Because you knew it.
I just knew it.
The tears were tears of acknowledgement of, okay, it's
you're
time.
You're going to use this. And I had enough, like I said, I'd done some of the other behind the scenes work, in my secret place and in my community, to know when God is calling you. So I remember Jamie wanting me to do a post on Instagram, and back then I had after being, with everything out in the publicity, I didn't want anything. I'm like, she goes, oh yeah, I want to put a picture so people know your group. And that was a big deal. Like, I had to pray about that. Like, can I do this? Can I put myself out there? But I'm going to tell you.
No turning back. This is it.
And that was the single most thing that changed my life and the trajectory of my life, honestly. Because I went from leading this amazing small group of women that grew over time, and we kept that group for the entire time that I lived here, and brought it even into my home, which is even more intimate. And then got invited to actually work under you, Brian, here at the Healing Place. First, just being I was the facilitator of the divorce care class here, which is an amazing program for, especially when you are just literally coming off the floor. It's just a community that you can get into right away. And I got immense joy of doing that. It was very healing for me.
And for your friends.
And for my friends. No, really. And from there, I was asked to become a care coach. Went through some training.
Became my star care coach. I always say, yeah.
What's a care coach?
A care coach is, in layman's terms, it is just someone that, we do have a training to walk us through what that looks like, to walk alongside somebody.
Basically a voluntary mental health coach and life coach and spiritual mentor coach. Yeah.
And what we do here at the healing place is to pair you up with somebody that's they're walking through what you've walked through. So it's a Me Too kind of thing. That's what we talk about, like sitting, because most of the time, and yes, I have had lots of, professional counselors in my healing process. And sometimes what we really need is just someone to sit next to you, and all you do is look at each other in the eyes, and it's just like, you too. Yeah. Like there is that's community again, right? And so, and my sister likes to say that when I started doing that one-on-one with women, it was the most alive she'd ever seen me. And it was the first time I really felt that purpose in my life.
I watched it.
Yeah.
The passion, how literally you came alive. Well, and think about, you said this was the defining moment when you said, okay, I got to post a picture. There's no turning back. I'm doing this. Like you came out of hiding.
Yeah.
Just for anyone out there, like that thinks their testimony and the shame is too much. You came out of hiding. It's here I am.
Yeah.
100% vulnerable. Here I am, and fully known. And then, wow, who knew? Fully loved.
Right?
So
yeah.
loved.
And then you helping other people.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know where I heard it first, but our greatest human need, they said, is not solutions, it's solidarity. To that sitting eye to eye, knee to knee, you too, me too. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That vulnerability. Isn't that weird how we missed it for so long? We thought we had to have it together.
Yeah.
God says, a broken and contrite heart I will not despise. Me either.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to hear the guy's got it all together.
No.
I want to hear the guy saying, man, I'm broken and I need help. I'm like, oh, man, I got you, bro. That's me too,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just smiling because I'm thinking, like, what's the entire platform that the 12 steps are built on? You want the $1 trillion cure, right? It says, nothing so much ensures immunity from drinking as intensive work with another alcoholic. It works when everything else fails. Like that's what when you sit face to face with someone who's been through what you've been through, that moment of like, I don't have to explain everything.
Yes.
It's just like,
oh, you get
like
me. I get
all of this you already get.
Yes.
So we can start
like instant
with,
validation.
Yes.
Spirit to spirit.
Yes.
This is communion. This is the spirit communing with another spirit.
Absolutely.
I think this is pulling up that bread and that wine, like and having that, Me Too moment with another person. There's something sacred about that. You're like, man, let's toast. Let's break this bread. Let's toast to his good man. We got this together. You're not on your own. That's that we're taking in the body and blood of Christ.
Absolutely.
We talk about what it means and what it is. It's like, how about we don't worry about these elements changing? How about we worry about those elements changing us?
Yeah.
The transformation. And that happens with another person sitting. Church many times is sitting shoulder to shoulder. We come in with our crap and we leave with it. So it's like, let's turn from shoulder to shoulder. Let's get eyeball to eyeball, knee to knee, right?
Yep.
And just, here we are.
you get to do that every day.
I do it every
healing
day.
place.
I love it. I literally love it.
This is an amazing, the healing place to me it was profound. And in serving the community that way, to be just a part of that, that is what has stirred what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
It is what stirred my heart and passion. It is what stirred Victor and I to write this book. It is what is going to stir us to launch this into a ministry, to continue to help other people.
We're called to love the Lord our God with all our mind, heart, soul, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourselves. What I usually ask people next is, hey, how do you do that?
Yeah.
What is love?
Yeah.
Baby, no, I'm kidding. Love is patient. Love is kind. It doesn't envy. It doesn't boast. It's not a respecter of person. Like when
Keeps no record of wrongs. I always say that to the couples in marriage.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
But it's true. It's like when we're focused on what love is and what it looks like to emulate Jesus, he literally said, love God, secret place, love others, community,
Yep.
right? And why am I loving God in the secret place? So that I can go out and love others in the community.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
then,
That's why we talk about the step of secret place, so then you can do the next. That's really why we wrote it that way.
And there's all these ways of like showing people what transformation looks like in your life. Baptism, for instance, right? Like you got baptized at Gateway.
I did. That was, having a Catholic background, I was baptized as a baby, and so I always like to refer to it as a rebaptism. But you know what? That again, I think baptism to me,
Believer's baptism.
is a yes. And to me, the reason why I chose to get baptized at that point in my life, because I knew where I was going. It wasn't really that. It was just an outward commitment to an inward decision I'd already made. It was just an outward way. When you stand on a stage and do that and show the world, even it was my inward commitment that was already there, but it was just important for me to do that out in public and confess that out in there. So it was just another step of my healing journey.
Celebration with your family to show what he's already done.
And a true surrender, right? Like a true surrender to my life. Like I spent the prior 40 years trying to be the God of my life, right? Control. And I needed to go this way with that. So that to me was that internal change of God, you are my everything.
You found the source of a love that would never reject you.
Wow. Because
rejection was your biggest fear. I mean, if you look behind what you were trying to protect yourself with all the control, it's not getting to that point, not being rejected.
I wasn't prepared for that, but you're right. That makes me emotional. I think a lot of people have that fear of being rejected, and having been rejected and walking that still is a struggle. I won't lie. There still is. The enemy likes to poke at that every once in a while. But when
all different forms from all different people.
Sure.
Absolutely. But if you know whose you are, you can work through that. It doesn't mean you won't still feel that pain from deep rejection. But when you know who your identity is in and who God says you are, you can come out of that quicker and you don't stay in it as long. And so to me, that was what healing looked like. It doesn't mean that I don't ever have that pain from what that happened, but the ability to remind myself who God says I am. And I always used to say this with even the women that I work with that experienced some of the same rejection things that I had, is it's not like you're going to get to this perfection where it never happens and you're just over it. Like people love to say, oh, just get over it. And it's not. And so to me, it's progress. And so I always ask them, are you having those moments less? And when you have them, are you staying in it shorter time? So it's frequency and duration. And so to me, you have to give yourself grace for that.
That's good.
Because that is growth. That is healing.
Absolutely.
And when Brian, no one says to you, you lost your son when he was 2. Well, you have a day you cry about that. Brian, you need to get over that.
Right.
But isn't it interesting how people that get divorced, they're like, oh, get over it. He's no good. What do you... But when you love that deep and you love someone that deep and then they choose to not stay with you in the covenant of marriage, that is soul crushing. And that is that death and that loss. And so...
and then the other half of that is the life that they embark on afterwards too.
Right, you get to, the hard part for me...
For a family-oriented person like you.
Right.
Yes.
Well, it changes everything. It's not just you. It changes your entire family.
I said that. Yes, it is. The path of destruction is wide in that. And to be rejected and then watch that other part of your life go on without you. That, you can have a death and someone can be gone. But if you have a death in a marriage, that person's still there. And they're outwardly choosing to not be with you. And so that was a really hard place for me to get in that rejection with that. But that took a lot of time in the secret place with God. And so when I work with women on that, you got to allow yourself to feel that emotion of that, but also know this is the whole point of why we did the book, is that God does have something beautiful for you. It may not be what you thought your beautiful was, because maybe that wasn't so beautiful. And so you've got to trust that God has something beautiful in that moment for you, so you can release that. It doesn't mean you won't have days every once in a while that you cry about it. That's okay.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to have that moment, and then remind yourself who you are.
Well, some days too are also really dark.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the purpose of community is, when it gets too much, back at the first chapter, right? Galatians 6:2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ.
Yeah.
Why? Because sometimes, man, this goes back to spiritual warfare. The battle is hard. The battle is tough, and we do get isolated, and that doesn't just go away, and we do start to believe lies. So you need people to battle with you.
I was gonna say, if you don't have community, when I just described you what that feels like,
you're alone.
Without
you wouldn't make
community,
it would be soul crushing. You've got other people carrying your burdens. There is community. You met our foreign exchange student from 10 years ago on Sunday, at lunch. Oh. She came, another culture from France, lived with us for a year, and this is over 10 years ago, and was not a believer. And to this day, it's interesting how she describes what her evolution and what's going on in her as far as faith. But she was drawn back to Texas, didn't know what she didn't know, had never experienced love and acceptance and being embraced and being seen and being valued. And it's like, this is different. She didn't know it existed, this level of openness and vulnerability and community, right? So she goes home, she comes back to visit once, and then she comes back another time to live with us for 4 months, an internship. And she's visiting as we speak, right? Came back to visit for like 2.5 weeks. She is saying the one thing, she goes, I still don't know if I would consider myself a believer. But she said, I've never seen community like you have at church. This is what she says, it's the thing that we don't have at home anywhere. This doesn't exist. Because I always think you can find community at the gym, you can find it at the coffee, at the bar, whatever. She's like, the community where people, our brothers and sisters, have each other's back and care. Like she says, the vulnerability and the transparency and the way that you feel like you care for one another and you're not alone. Right. She said, so that's really, really cool because she's seeing that brother and sister in that community. Yeah.
We have our garden that we're called to manage, and we can plant the seed. We can give it the right sunlight, the right amount of water, eggshells and miracle grow. You can do all the things, right? And only God can give that seed life.
Yes.
So, it was really talking about like, hey, God's in control. You're called to manage your garden. Go out there, parable the seeds that were plant your seeds, but water, nourish the relationships, cultivate community, and watch God do incredible, awesome things when those seeds get life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard you given your encouragement and your challenge. I would just say, you don't have to be alone. Don't stay isolated. The 10 seconds of courage, community exists. Just go join it. And I understand being burned. And I understand having to be discerning and being choosy. But community exists. Just don't go it alone.